We're gonna talk about a little bit advanced topic when it comes to events. There are multiple use of multiple different events, but this one is kind of a big deal that I kind of wanted you to know in case you come across. It's called event capturing and bubble. So the idea is I removed everything. We only have right now one section. We only have section 3. That's it, and we have the button in here. So I want to show you something here. So if when you call an event, so let me actually create here a little bit. So think of when you're clicking on something, think of we have the window. So this is the window. It's kind of like the main thing. Inside the window, we have the HTML tag. I'm bad at this. Okay, let's just say window, right? This is HTML. Let's see, HTML. Okay, that's HTML tag. And inside the HTML tag, we have the body tag. So this would be body tag, and if you look here, this is the HTML tag and this is the body tag, and then the window is like the whole window. Inside here we have section. Just do this all the way to the bottom, and the S would be section 3, right? The section that we have, and then in here we have the button, right? This would be the button. We have other things. We have like B, or like I think we have 2 paragraphs on header. But the idea is when you click on something, think of this as the lowest levels. So you're actually clicking you're clicking the window, which means you are going through, right? You're going through the whole thing until you reach the button. When your button is your target, so you're clicking through. So that's kind of the number one thing you need to know. So if this one, right, if the S1 has a click, if it's listening for a click, it will be called. So if the H is listening for the HTML is listening for a click, it will be called. If the window is listening for a click, it will be called. So we call all the clicks all the way to our target. And if I kind of show this in another way, let's say we have, this is the window and this is the HTML, kind of creating a hierarchy. So this would be the body, right? This would be the section 3. So it would be section, just say it as, and then we have the button here, right? So when you click, if you just click the H1, if the H1 has a tag, it will just reach here and then it stops because you reach where you're going for. If you're clicking on the S3, right, which is the div, it would go all the way to the S3 and then it would just stop. But we're clicking on this, so it would actually gonna call, it would call all the way to this. It finds the target, and after we find the target, we actually come back. So we kind of come back all the way up, right? So this one, we're actually visiting all of them. Are you the target? No. Are you the target? No. Are you the target? Yes. And then we go up. So this, I'm just gonna kind of delete that a little bit. So this phase is called capturing phase, right? Writing vertical, that is going to be fun. So this phase is capturing phase. Capturing with a G. Okay, so this is the capturing phase, and this one is called, just move here a little bit. This one is called bubbling phase, right? Because you guys, it's kind of bubbling from the button. And historically, right, this is kind of a little bit of context. Historically, when Netscape designed it, they wanted to call, and they wanted to call in this phase. So they're saying, hey, let's call the W1 first, and then let's call the H. So let's say, since we're collecting all of it, let's just assume F3 has a click, right? It has like it's listening for on click, right? And this one is listening on click. They're both listening for on click. So right here, so we call on click, but nothing is listening. Then we reach here. So Netscape was like, hey, let's first handle this. So it would basically say like diff is pressed, right? The diff would come first because we're calling the capturing phase. And then we reach S. And when we reach here, this would say, oh, the button is called. So the button would come second, the diff would come first because the button. And then Microsoft wanted the other way around. So Microsoft wanted the bubbling phase. So they said, hey, the button should be called, right? So Microsoft would be button, and then you call the other one. So you call div. So they would call it the bubbling phase. So it calls this, and then it kind of goes from the bottom to the top versus the other way around. Yeah, that's all. That's all for theory. Let's get started to practice. So let's actually, let me kind of show you here. So I'm just gonna use here script. I want to create the button. So get element. Now you need to have the document, get element by tag name, and I want button, and I want the first button because we only have one button, and I want section 3. So document that I can get it by ID, so that we just say section 3, boom. And I want two handlers. One is called button pressed. What it does is pretty obvious. So console log button pressed, and then I want to create another one here called diff pressed, and it is basically, it's called diff pressed. Great. So now what I want to do is I want to add to the button. So it's going to be button dot add event. Not mind if I forget it. So add event listener. I want to listen for you, and these are all the events you can listen, by the way. Look at how many we have. Oh, it's starting from C. So I want to listen for a click on button pressed. Okay, and I want to listen on, what is it, section 3 dot add event listener, and here I want to listen no, thank you, but now I want to listen for the diff pressed. So now let me run out the code here. Now let me see here. So if I click on the diff, look what happens. Diff pressed. Okay, great. Again, diff pressed. Great. Now look what happens if I click the button. I get button pressed, and then I get diff pressed, because the default is actually the Microsoft way. So the button comes first. So what happened here? Since these both have clicks, when we found this, we call the handler, right? Right here we call the handler of button, which is why it says button pressed. But then we still need to go all the way to the top. So in the process of bubbling up, we also have to handle the click on W3, right? Because if you look at it, we click on first before we click on this one right here before we reach the button. So then we have a diff. So that is where you can see, although we didn't necessarily click on the diff, because the diff is kind of like on top of the button, we click on both of them. That's very fun. So there is actually one more thing here. So the default is kind of the Microsoft face. So default, it's like it's bubbling up. That's when we think of like that. If I add, let me just add true here, and let's see what happens, because that is actually the property. I don't know if it's going to change anything, but let's call this. Now you see the diff is called first. So now we are calling it in the capturing phase. So before we were calling bubbling phase, right? We were calling the Microsoft kind of style. Now we're calling the Netscape, which is the bubbling phase. So we call the diff first because S3 first, because we first click on the diff before the B. That's why it says diff comes first and button comes next. And that actually we don't need that one here. So this is the last one. It's called capturing. So here in the default is false. So right now that here it's like that's the default. It's the false, right? That's the Microsoft is bubbling up. And Netscape style, if you want the other way around to call it in the capturing phase, right? If you want to call it in the capturing phase, capturing phase, you have to explicitly say true. And now if I repeat this, you see the diff comes first. But since the default is the bubbling up, I just like to use the default, so just make it there. Great. So now actually I want to leave it there. So that would be, I'm just gonna say false just to show it, and then that would be bubbling phase and default. Great. So that's kind of the first one. But no matter which one we call first, but we still have a problem, right? We still call every single thing on our way up. Now let me do another one just to kind of make it just even harder. So if I say function body pressed, and you probably guess what this means. Okay, body pressed. I'm just using press as a click. Okay, now we get the body. So const It's gonna be body is gonna be document get element by I could just use tag name again. Body, we only have one body anyway. So and then let me just say body dot add event listener, event listener, click body pressed, save it. And now look what happens if I click on here. You see I called the div first, I called the button, I called the body. I'm just gonna remove this because we already know how that works, so we don't want to worry about that again. So let me just save it. Okay, run this. You see this is exactly what we're doing. We call the button first. The default is bubbling up, so we call the button is handler, then we call the S1 handler, then we call the body handler. But the problem is, what if we don't want to call, like what if we just want the call button? We don't care about everything else. Why does it still go all the way up? And what if I don't want to call any of this? That's what I want to show you how to solve it. So this process of the event starting from the top and ending all the way to the top, that's called propagation. That's what event propagation means. So we can explicitly, once we reach wherever we want to reach, we can stop from going on. So we can stop it, where is it? Yep. So we can stop it right here. So if we say stop propagation, once we call the button, then we never go up, so we never call the other one. So there is something that I did not talk about that would be important here. Now, in every function, since we just pass, we don't call the functions here, we just give it. So we're like, hey, call whenever you feel like it. Whenever we pass the function like this, the browser, right, call is this. And when it calls, it actually gives us an event. Yep, it gives us an event. And that event has more information on it. For example, it has, let me actually do this. It has an event target. So just say target. I want to kind of show you this. Okay, event target, and then event target. It has many more information, but I just want to show you the target now. So if I click on this, you see it just keeps saying the target is the button. So the button is pressed because the target is the button. The div is pressed although the target is the button. The body is pressed although the target is the button. You see that? So it knows the target it's a button, but to get to the target, it knows the target, but to go through after the target, it just keeps going and still calling it. So we can stop it there. And this is also another way we can identify where we clicked on. For example, if I click on right here, see the div is pressed. So the div and the body, because the body is on top of the div. But again, you see our target is the div. So what we need to do this event, first of all, it tells us what target we are looking for. So now this kind of tells you one thing already. It tells you we can just use one click. Actually, I can go deep into this, but I don't want to do that. But what we can do is just, I could have one press instead of like 3 files. This is another concept called event delegation. That's kind of even more faster than that. I don't want to cover it right now. You know what? I'm going to cover it in the next video. Let's just keep going right now. This is getting too long. Okay, cool. So let's say, okay, so how do I stop? That's the main thing. Once we reach the button right here, I forget T. But anyway, here is where we can say event that stop it's bad, it's spelling. Stop propagation. And let's try for if it works. Let's see it. Great, it works. See? And actually, I'm gonna remove the target part here. Save it. And if I run this, you see, we don't bubble up. We stop it right here. And this is really cool, because you will have many times when you don't want to bubble all the way up and call all the handlers on the way up related with the event. You just want to stop as soon as you reach that, and that's it. So that's how we solve it. You know, I wanted this video to be the last, but I like the concept of using the event target. I will cover that in the next video. Yeah, that's it for this video. See you in the next one. Bye bye.